want to talk to you a little bit about social justice, working in public service, and also sustainability, and it all revolves around pie. So when I first started working in community development work, I ran a small garden and started to learn about homelessness, people needing cold food, food they could cook without a kitchen. And I really started to like the work I was doing, but I had a job. Like, I had a job where I designed clothes, and I knew from the time I was 4 years old that, you know, I had a little sewing machine, and all my dollies had little outfits, and I'd be a clothing designer. So somehow, 20 years later, I'm designing clothes for my dolls that are bigger now. And I spent 20 years doing clothing design for Victoria's Secret, and just felt like my life wasn't going very far, like I wasn't really contributing much. And I kind of grew up in a nice neighborhood in California, and definitely wanted to do more. I started working with women with cancer. Had a little studio where I would cast people with terminal cancer, and they'd really get the experience of seeing what their bodies look like. Everybody really felt like the cancer lived in their heads, and were really surprised. There's a body attached to this? Because a lot of that process is really, and the process of exploring ourselves as we change, as our image shatters of ourselves, it becomes really interesting. So kind of growing up, our house burned down, my mom died, all within this really short period of time. And I really wanted to see what else was out there for me besides pajamas, which I loved a lot. And Victoria's Secret was this really amazing opportunity to travel the world and learn things, but it wasn't as fulfilling, I shouldn't say that, maybe they'll get mad at me. It wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And I started to see if there were other things I might do. So I joined Auburn University Rural Studio as an outreach fellow, and just after my brother was murdered, and I was trying to think of a way to re-find myself. And it's funny to go to a place-based community where no one ever leaves. And of course, I've been all over the world and never felt at home. And then somehow, through that process, moving to Greensboro, catfish capital of America, I really started to feel like it was a place where I belonged and a place where the work that I did mattered. And one of the first things I did was start to invite groups to help us. There was a lot of work to do. I had no idea how to do a lot of it, and I had to find some partners that would do that work with me. So we took a lot of buildings that looked like this, and we turned them into buildings that looked like this. And we did it as a way to start to create ways for more people to come. So it became a bunkhouse where people could stay. Started to create job training for a lot of prisoners that could come out every day from a minimum security prison, work in our community. They would help me with a lot of Main Street buildings that were vacant and abandoned. There was no hope for these buildings. And they started to look like this. And it was a really exciting time to kind of explore where my limitations were. What did I think I could do? What was I able to do with help of others? What could we all do together? And then start to kind of develop a sense of what the social justice work we needed to do was in a community that, you know, to borrow from the local bank, you're going to borrow at 37.5% interest, and you're going to not have many resources. There's no capital for the nonprofit. We're not going to find ways to, we don't have any money to do anything, and so we have to do everything with free and found materials. So we kept trying new projects. We'd find historic schools that were architecturally significant and would renovate them with free and found materials, with found labor, turning them into spectacular places that really started to represent the community and how people felt about the community, maybe not what it looked like, but start to make it better than it was. So through one of our partnerships, we started to create something called Buy a Meter. About 25% of our families don't have running water. And I had worked there about 3-4 years before I realized nobody had running water, and I knew what the smell was sitting next to somebody who didn't have running water. I just didn't know what it was, and I hadn't allowed myself to see fully what was happening in the community. So together we did this kind of crazy piece, and it started out with Oprah Has One, and it went through a series of you know, people that had them, and eventually we got to the fact that in Hale County water isn't a right, but the truth is it's not a right for anybody. in the US. And if you don't have running water, what are the things that need to change for that to happen? So we started to raise money. We raised about $50,000 to help people that never had a water meter get a water meter. I'm thinking, yes, this is the coolest job I've ever had. I love my life. It's way better than pajamas. And the next thing that happened was really ugly. There was almost like a lynching in my office. People came in spitting and angry, and I had made people in power that were white seemed like they were keeping water from blacks. I had no idea, who knew that? And through that process, what I realized was that our city, which is primarily white, the city had the lowest water cost in the nation, the county had the highest. And through that process of learning about, and I had been there a few years, I hadn't allowed myself to fully see the level of segregation. It wasn't just restaurants, it wasn't schools, it wasn't that it was, every church. It's that everything revolved around race. Started working with some families and trying to find ways to help people in need empower themselves to do more. And with this particular family, they never had running water. They ran a hose from a neighbor's place, and it was well water. It wasn't really safe to drink. All the sewage is shallow, and it was a shallow well, and it was pretty unsafe. So, one day, it's probably the worst day of my life. I'm standing there, and all the little kids are waiting at the sink with their toothbrushes. They're so excited, and I'm under the house, and I'm laying in raw sewage, and I'm laying on a sheet of tin, roofing tin, to get under the house to hook up the pipes. Super excited to get it going, and the kids are thrilled, and all of that, just that process of seeing that happen. And for about $7, we were able to get running water to this family who had never had running water. And then through that process, I got to know the family well, and the community got to know me. And eventually, I learned that the mom in this family had survived incest, and she was allowing her abuser to pay for time with her children. And through, you get embedded in a community. I've been there 11 years now. People are just starting to trust me. I'm just starting to allow myself to see the truth in the work. Some of those times, it's pretty shocking. And for those of you in that field of work or will go into that field of work, I'd encourage you to find ways to let that truth sink in faster than I did, because you've got to be able to see what's happening in your community to be able to affect change. You've got to be able to see the whole community. And it's for these children that you have to do it, because if you're not seeing what's happening, and it's in a place where there's extreme poverty that's been going on for so many generations, it's not going to change until we see what's happening, and we acknowledge what's happening, and we find a way to change it. This is a woman with cancer who had really been having a hard time healing because she didn't have hot water in her home. And it's pretty easy to get some volunteers together to get to the home, to get that working. Eventually the home burned down because it just was so substandard. There was really no way to fix it. Got a group of people together. We built her a small cottage. And it was a place where she could live until she passed. What I realized in working with her is that she was pimping out her granddaughter to 7 men. And it's a tough thing. Like, you're in that, you're there, you're working, the kids are working with you. If I had noticed sooner, could I have done more for the family? So just those things, through social justice, through being in those environments, challenging yourself to see the truth of what's around. This is not as depressing, sorry about that. So I also started to develop a lot of small businesses in the vacant buildings, just with free and found materials. Started a small craft business where I could get orders for 30,000 necklaces at a time, and a lot of women were making minimum wage, starting to really change their lives. They're recognizing they don't want to be in public housing with stabbings and murders. They want their kids to have a home to live in. And with minimum wage, they can get approved for a loan to own a home. They empowered themselves. In this particular picture, one of the women became a homeowner. Her friend with her was so inspired, she tried starting to improve her credit. So one of the things we do is really trying to talk to people about what options you have and trying to make things better. So to get the home, we got a whole group of people together, started building a home, got a lot of people working hard. One of the workers in the shop, she moved into her new home, and it really made a change. Her son did better in school, she was a happier person. Everybody started moving out of public housing. They were creating spaces for new people to have decent housing in public housing, and then those people to also see that you can get out and move into decent housing. Through that process, what we realized was that all the women that worked in that necklace line making these beautiful handcrafted necklaces were also committing fraud. If they were shipping $1,200 a week, they were charging $4,800 a week. And so through the work, we realized you have to have really close controls on everything you're doing. You might think you're doing great work, but what we realized, we didn't have enough controls in place to do the real good work that we needed to do. And when everybody is desperate, it's those that are most vulnerable that are going to be affected. And through our work, we can add those controls in so that that doesn't happen. Started to work more with vacant, abandoned buildings. In this particular building, the back of the building had fallen off, the doors had fallen off, the ceiling started to collapse, the windows had fallen out. We started a pop-up shop, pie shop, and really wanted to see what we could create. And there was a demand for pie. We would sell it by 10 a.m. and we realized we had to have a permanent spot. But none of us had ever really built a building, certainly not a building that was in really tough condition. And we had to find free and found materials every night so we could work the next day. So what we did was work together to create a little pie shop called Pie Lab, kind of a social experiment where we could have a lot of conversation around pie. Pie is a place where people linger. And we started through this to do some good design. We got nominated as one of the best restaurants in the nation for restaurant design through a James Beard Award. We didn't win. I think we lost to the Wright Cafe in the Guggenheim Museum. So it was really kind of a cool experience to try. And we started baking pies, we started doing face painting contests. It was kind of a neat thing where anybody on TANF or welfare could come in and work in the community. Prisoners could work, anybody getting out of prison could do good work there. And it was a really exciting time to see how change could happen in the community. We did realize, as in every project we do, there could be some downside. So some of the women were buying their groceries on our tab at the grocery store, that kind of thing. So that's easy, you can start to watch for that. What we didn't expect was that the grandma who baked the pies was actually having an affair with many of the prisoners and was using that on work time. And she was also selling drugs at the local prison. She has a felony now and is in prison. But one of those things, like, you're not gonna see it if you're not really looking at what's going on every day around you, things you would never expect to see in these projects. So through social justice, sustainability, doing public service, the caution is really to look honestly at what's happening and to see if there's a way that you can make the controls that need to happen so it's successful. And one of the things I think I would challenge you in your work is we have an obligation to see clearly and to get rid of those things that keep you from seeing clearly in your work is really embedding in the community, being honest about the work that you're doing, and then and being able to talk about the truth with everyone you work with. Thank you.